From athletes to authors, entertainers to innovators, we connect with those who help shape our culture. Join us in revealing stories of their lives and backgrounds, their triumphs and tragedies that molded them into who they are today. Authentically off-script and personally illuminating, this is Audibles with Jason Scarborough. Coming up next on Audibles, John Cohen.
So, been a while since we've done one of these. Anything happened since the last time that we did one of these?
Just a couple of life changes for sure.
So how would you fill in the gap the last, it's been 3 years since the last time we did one of these. So through your eyes, how would you describe the last 3-4 years?
Wow, in college athletics, the landscape is just constantly evolving, moving, changing. It's so there's always a ton of changes, and obviously, coming to Auburn University was a big change for myself and our family. So lots of things happening. But to be honest with you, just feel so privileged to get the opportunity to come to work every day and work with student athletes and staff and at great places like Mississippi State and Auburn University.
So I'll go ahead and just ask a question right out of the gate for everybody back home in Mississippi. Why now? Why the change now? Because I'm sure you got 1,000 text messages probably asking the same. And you gave a lot of the reasons at your introductory press conference, but if you had to put it in a nutshell, why now?
Yeah, I just think great opportunity, great timing. Life is all about timing, and I just feel so privileged having been at Mississippi State as long as I was, I guess, 15 years. Again, just so privileged to be able to represent that place. It means so much to me. Very proud alum. I feel like I got a world-class education at Mississippi State University. But when this opportunity came up, there were several factors involved, but I just felt like it was that moment, it was that opportunity to do something a little bit different. And even though I do miss the Mississippi State family and ton of friends, when you play a sport at an institution, that's your brotherhood. And so I'm sure there's probably some hard feelings there, but so many of those guys have been so incredibly supportive wherever I've been. I mean, and I've been all over. I always tell folks I've now lived in 7 Southeastern Conference cities. 7 out of the current 14. Of course, it's going to be 16 here shortly, but yeah. So I'm well traveled, but really enjoyed my time in Starkville.
The last time we sat down too, you had a lot of challenges you were facing. We had COVID. You were having to make changes or make new hires in, I think it was, you just made a new hire in football. There was there was all sorts of new hires and challenges that were facing you at Mississippi State. Going through that, how has that shaped you when you fast forward to now? How has that shaped kind of how you handle things now?
Well, certainly it's like any other profession. When you make decisions and you do research and you go through a process, it really shapes you. It really helps mold you and help you with that next decision, whenever that's going to be. And of course, ultimately, in this world of college athletics, you're going to have to make tough decisions, and they're not going to stop. Obviously here at Auburn, we hired Hugh Freeze. Well, I would love for that to be the last hire, at least of a coach, for a long time at Auburn. But you never know what the future brings you, and I learned a lot through those experiences at Mississippi State. I've learned a lot at every stop along the way. Northwestern Louisiana, when I was there in Natchitoches, Louisiana, I feel like I learned a ton. And probably really at that young an age didn't know exactly what I was doing. But, it's funny, I was telling a group of interns last night with our external group here at Auburn, I was allowed to fail. And folks my age, when we were your age, when we were very young in our 20s, we were allowed to fail. Kids aren't allowed to fail the way we were, and that's how you learn, is through struggles and through failure.
Why do you think that is? You're right. Why do you think that is nowadays, that students or student athletes are just kids that age overall? Why do you think that is?
I think it has a lot to do with social media and how social media relates to mental health. And I think it's a real problem in our country. I think the two are intertwined. I've spoken to all of our student athletes at Auburn and specifically told every team, your mental health, the way you feel, cannot be derived from your interpretation of social media, of what people think of you, what they're saying, what they're not saying. And that's something that I'm saying people my age, just didn't have to deal with. Our failures were not really widely known. Student athletes' failures now are very widely known, and they're at the touch of a button, you're aware of everything that not only that they have done on or off the field or court or whatever it is, but also their feelings that they have projected on social media themselves. So there's really not a place for the student athlete to hide. And I think that's one of the things about social media that's a little disappointing to me.
Yeah, I hate to break this to you, but in my age too, we didn't have it either. I'm a little older than you.
I didn't want to make that assumption. I didn't want to put you in my age group.
I thought that might give it away a little bit. I got some sprinkles in my goatee here. Yeah, we didn't have MySpace. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have all that. And so you're absolutely right about social media. So I know that as an athletic director, I mean, your focus is championships. And before you left Mississippi State, on your watch, they were able to win their first ever national championship in baseball. And you talked about that brotherhood a minute ago. That moment, how gratifying was that moment for you personally?
Well, it's not just about me. One of the first people I thought of was Dr. Mark Keenum. Nobody deserved that national championship more than Mark Keenum. Mark Keenum oversaw and allowed us to build that great facility in Starkville. And of course, that just goes in line with the rest of that university, which has been built up and is a beautiful campus, and really is so different than when I attended school there. But I was so happy for Chris Lemonis and his staff. They put so much into that. But there was still a group of guys, and I remember being in some of their homes. In fact, one of the homes I was in was Rowdy, and Rowdy's actually from Auburn. I remember being in his home. So there are times where I passed by his neighborhood here in Auburn and remember the 2 times I went into his home, because there was a new head coach at Auburn at that time named Butch Thompson, who might have wanted the services of Rowdy. But the connectivity I had with that team just through several of the kids who played there, and but it was a magical season. It was something that I'll always be proud of. But I thought the way Coach Lemonis handled that, and the way he connected that team with the history of that program, I thought that was really powerful. Every single former player got a national championship hat and a letter saying, you're a big part of this. And in reality, they are. Everyone who played in that program was a big part of that national championship, and it's something that we'll always look back on and feel good about.
You mentioned at your introductory press conference here as athletic director, when you introduced as AD here at Auburn, there's always been a whole lot of wow for you when it came to Auburn. I got to ask, I mean, you're only human. Also, if you think this way, was it ever a situation where you looked at Auburn from afar, maybe over the years, and said, you know what, if it ever comes as a possibility, that makes a lot of sense? Did you ever look at it that way?
Well, I grew up in the state of Alabama, so I've always looked at Auburn as you always have with all the people you compete against. But one of the many things about Auburn that's of interest is really, with the exclusion maybe of 1 or 2 sports, Auburn's been on the cusp of winning a national championship in every program. Track and field has a tremendous background, tradition here. Women's basketball in the late 80s, early 90s is so close. Championship game, national championship game. Obviously, we're a part of it, Mississippi State as well. I mean, you look at the football tradition here, 2 national championships. You look at softball, the great runs they've had in Oklahoma City, here at Auburn. Those pockets of success. Look at what Butch has done now, along with Coach Baird way back in the 90s. Butch has been to the College World Series 2 out of the last 4 years, and really proud of what he's been able to accomplish there. You just really, both of our tennises and both of our golfs have been so close to winning a national championship in those sports. So, and I could go on and on. Our equestrian team has won national championships as well. Every sport, if we can all just pull in the same direction and get where we need to go, every sport at Auburn has a legitimate chance to win a national championship. And I think that's something that drives all of us here every single day.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
When life is unpredictable, choose Express Care Summerall to get the medical help you need. We're the only clinic in Summerall open 7 days a week. We also offer the convenience of drive-through accessibility and walk-ins with no appointment necessary. Our nurse practitioners Sarah Dawn Locke and Kobe Smith welcome you to our location on Highway 42 next to Fox's Pizza. Find your new primary care provider, Express Care Summerall, where your health care matters.
Wendy's new breakfast 2 for $3 is so good, the crew is giving every combination code names.
I got that sauce bisque and some tay-tays.
More formally known as sausage biscuit and small seasoned potatoes.
Bis squared.
Egg and cheese biscuit and sausage biscuit. 2 biscuits. I'm impressed Tyler knew what squaring was.
Cup of dubba java.
It's 2 coffees.
Cup of dubba java.
No matter what you call it, Wendy's breakfast is that breakfast. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's new 2 for $3 Biggie Bundles.
When you find a great community, you will find great health care. That is exactly what King's Daughters Medical Center provides. Keeping businesses moving with occupational wellness, heart-healthy screenings, diabetes education and management, community education, and remote patient monitoring that promotes better care in between regular office visits. KDMC, caring for our community like no one else can.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
I know it was a big opportunity, and like you said, it's a great opportunity for you. I am curious, though, the emotions. There had to be a lot of different emotions for you. You spent a large part of your adult life in Starkville, in the state of Mississippi. Great opportunity, yes, but there's got to be a lot of emotions flying around.
There's no question. I remember calling my then 91-year-old mother and saying, "Hey, Mom, I think this could happen. I might end up at Auburn." And her question was, "Why?" And I didn't have the time to explain. Of course, my mother is an Alabama graduate, as are many of my family members, including Nell's family members, but which just makes my life even more ironic. The amount of ironies that are out there are pretty incredible. But yeah, certainly there was a lot of emotion, and it was a very difficult thing for me because, yeah, I mean, there's a large portion of my every fiber of my being that is part of Mississippi State and will always be. But again, this opportunity, this moment in time was just unique, and it wouldn't happen 4 years from now, and it wouldn't have happened 4 years ago. But for whatever time, all these things came together at one point in time to make a change in my life.
Yeah, speaking of emotion, you just touched on it, so I have to ask. I mean, you went to school, elementary school, on the campus of the University of Alabama. And I remember when we last sat down, you talked about the regard your parents held Bear Bryant in. You remember that?
Oh, sure. Hey, listen, my father passed away about, I guess it's been 12 years ago, 13 years ago. But I remember sitting in our living room watching an Alabama football game on the road, because if it was at home, our entire family, would have been there. But I remember my father, if Alabama was playing well, nobody was allowed to leave their seat. Like, if you got up to go to the restroom or go to the kitchen or whatever, my father would look at you and say, "What are you doing? Get back in your," or if Alabama was not playing well, my father would make everybody change their seats. I mean, and this is, of course, not uncommon in any football circles, but this was my father. And yes, he and my mother had an attachment. I actually did not go to elementary school on the campus. I went to like preschool, kindergarten on the campus, in the center of the campus of the University of Alabama. In fact, in kindergarten, you could hear the band playing the fight song like during kindergarten classes when I was a kid. And listen, until 18, there was some of that in my blood. The minute I got out the door and went to college, and of course later, the minute I got to Mississippi State, it was, it was all about Mississippi State. And then, my travels, then it was all about the Missouri Tigers, and then it was all, in northwestern Louisiana, and then Florida and Kentucky and everywhere else. So, we are what we are, right? I learned that in Latin at Mississippi State. Sumus quid sumus, we are what we are. I took 4 semesters of Latin at Mississippi State, but it was it was interesting growing up in Tuscaloosa, and I think this helps me, though, the vantage point of having lived in Tuscaloosa, the vantage point of having lived in Starkville, Mississippi, the vantage point of having lived in Gainesville, Florida, and Lexington, Kentucky, and Columbia, Missouri. It gives me a unique perspective. It also allows me to make really good recommendations for restaurants in those towns as well when people are traveling around. So,
we talked about emotion, just all the different emotions, and I wanted to go ahead and touch on this. Mike Leach you guys became pretty close when you were at Mississippi State, and he was new on the scene the last time we sat down, and there was just so much excitement. Of course, we eventually, partially or largely thanks to you, I finally got to sit down with Coach Leach and interview him too, and it was just, he was one of the nicest guys. I don't know if people understand how nice a guy he was. What is your favorite memory of Coach Leach? Do you, I know there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them, and they're pretty well documented with a lot of people around the country, which I think is just so neat. But I just think Coach Leach was such a great fit for Starkville, and I was just heartbroken at the way it all came to an end. But Mike was a real genius, not only in football, but in several other areas. And Mike Leach was Mike Leach, and it didn't matter if that camera was rolling or if it wasn't rolling. Mike Leach was like Mike Leach. He was an original, he was genuine, and we all miss him so much. He added so much, not just to Mississippi State, he added so much to college football and college athletics. So I still think of Mike all the time and miss him dearly. And, I remember talking to football coaches or football players at Washington State and administrators, and among all the things they would say is, hey, year one, it's going to be a transition because he runs a different type of offense. He's a different type of coach. Year two, it'll be a little bit better. And year three, he'll win 9 or 10 games. Well, year three, he won 9 games in the most difficult division in college football. So the guy was nothing but a winner. And if you look at the amount of times Mississippi State has won 9 or 10 games in the entire history of the program, it's not that many. But Mississippi State has a toughness and a grit to it, and I thought Mike really matched that. Everybody talked about Mike's innovation, but his toughness and the way he approached practice, to me, was as good as anybody I've ever seen.
He showed up to the interview that day in a T-shirt, Mississippi State T-shirt, cargo shorts and sandals, and I said, perfect. that was Mike Leach to a T. And the thing I appreciated about him, and I've told a lot of people this, and this is lost in this day and time, he shook my hand and looked me in the eye and said, thank you for I don't know how, do you run across that? People won't shake your hand and look you in the eye, but he was old school, and he would shake your hand and look you in the eye when he talked to you.
I think it happens more in our part of the world than maybe other places. But yeah, Mike, that was Mike. He's from Cody, Wyoming. And he was an original, and he's somebody that we're all going to miss.
We talked about Coach Butch Thompson earlier, and this is a guy that you have a professional and personal relationship with. It had to help when you came to Auburn to see a familiar face here. So what's it been like so far? You're still early here in Auburn, but what's it been like to be back, reunited with Coach Thompson?
I think it might have been more beneficial for our staff at Auburn that Butch was here than for me, because I think Butch might have said, "Hey, here's how this guy operates." But no, Butch is somebody. He and Robin are just the things that they've done for this community, their involvement, their care about not just Auburn, not just the baseball program, but the surrounding area, the state of Alabama. There's just not much Butch wouldn't do for anybody, and I've always known that about him. The one thing about Butch that it bothers me, and this isn't Butch specifically, it's when people meet Butch and they talk about Butch, they say what a great person he is. Not for a moment should it ever be lost what a great baseball mind that guy has. Because Butch has a little bit of the aw shucks thing, and I'm from rural Mississippi. That's just a cover up. This guy is exceptionally bright. He knows the game, and he can talk intelligently about almost anything. And he's somebody who I really respect. But he is that blend of a super talented coach who's intellectual, but also that guy who just really cares about people.
Talking about him and your time in the state of Mississippi, at Mississippi State, and now it was a great point of emphasis at your introductory press conference, the football hire. I don't even remember how many questions you got. I don't know if you remember. It was a big point of emphasis, and now you've got Coach Hugh Freeze here. Of course, he's from Independence, Mississippi, somewhere in that area. So did you know, what was your relationship like with Coach Freeze before now?
Met a couple of times, just sporadically at some events. I remember seeing him in West Point at the club there, but sporadic. We really didn't know each other as such, but did a ton of research in a short amount of time. I had to filter through things that are real and things that aren't real. That's pretty much what we do every day. Because again, we'll go back to social media. Social media you don't have to footnote anything in social media. You just state your opinion, and there are certain folks who might assume, the worst all the time. But really, to talk to Hugh's players, his former players, former coaches, people that were around his programs, a ton of people that in his circle and outside of his circle. And when those folks start saying the same thing repeatedly, you feel like you're onto something. And then you got to do a lot of research and find out what's real, what's not real. And in the end, I felt like there's no question that he was the right guy for the Auburn family.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We believe patient-centered care is where it all begins. That's why King's Daughters Medical Center ranks nationally in patient care and safety. Our staff's commitment to better healthcare means a higher quality of life for so many. We are one team, one heartbeat, one mission to provide this community with the high-quality healthcare. KDMC, caring for our community like no one else can.
For those on the go, we give you Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast.
What are we listening to? Are we listening to a playlist? Are we listening to a podcast?
What a great question.
Listen to our intimate interviews with guests on your favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and so many more.
Do you ever look back and say, you know, my life, the story could have ended up differently had it not been for your grandparents?
Incredibly different, for sure.
Plus, you'll hear behind-the-scenes commentary on each guest, interview preparation, location, and so much more from Jason himself.
Do you have a favorite Coach Bowden story that you can share with us?
I can tell you this, what you see with Bobby Bowden is what you get.
Check out Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast, on any of these popular podcast locations and hit subscribe, download, and enjoy. Now, back to the show.
You've said the word unique a couple of times since we sat down. It is unique, you being the former AD at Mississippi State. Now you've got the former Ole Miss head football coach here at Auburn. And you've got Coach Thompson from, as you put it, Coontail Road in Mississippi. So you got the Mississippi trio here on camp. Do you ever kind of look at this, step back for a minute and go, oh my gosh, because all the time you spent at Magnolia State and Coach Thompson and Coach Freeze being from North Mississippi, it is unique.
It is, and in fact, Tim Jackson, who's one of our deputy athletic directors, is a native of the state of Mississippi as well. It's a bordering state, so there's going to be some crossover for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of connective tissue. What's really interesting though is even though I've moved farther away from Tuscaloosa than Starkville was, the amount of connectivity to folks that I went to school with as a kid was greater here at Auburn for whatever reason than Mississippi State. So I come in contact with people I haven't seen in 30, 40 years on a regular basis here at Auburn and in my travels around the state that I for whatever reason, never saw at Mississippi State.
So at your introductory press conference too, I was like, I can't wait to ask him about this if we ever get to do part two. You said you had a 58-point document that kind of helped you go through the hiring process. It was going to be used for the football coach, if I remember correct. How did you come up with 58?
Yeah, I just stole, right? From other athletic directors or situations I've been in. I was so fortunate Greg Byrne allowed me to be in on the interview of Dan Mullen and other coaching candidates. Scott Strickland allowed me to be part of candidate searches for other sports. I really owe my career to several ADs. Jeremy Foley at Florida, Mitch Barnhart at Kentucky, goes on and on and on. Joe Castiglione at Missouri, now at Oklahoma. But just listening and being a part of that, you just keep adding to that list. Here's an area. On that list originally, social media was a small thing. On your list of, okay, what's this person's social media background? What is his family's social media? I mean, you just keep adding all the things that you need to cover. They're not necessarily questions. They're just emphasis on the background of this person. So, I'm sure every athletic director in the country has a pretty comprehensive list of things that they want to target. But I'm a list maker, Although if you ask my wife, Nell, she would say, not really. That guy hasn't been to a grocery store in our marriage. But I like making lists, and I like referring back to those lists.
One of the things you did in the introductory press conference, too, was you used the F word, Coach. Fit, yeah. And you've said it a lot since Coach Freeze has been hired here, fit. What makes him such a good fit for Auburn, you think?
Well, I think the Auburn community, like many in the Deep South and in the Southeastern Conference, but the Auburn community really demands someone who really wants to be part of the community, not somebody who's just going to hide in their office. And look, there's football season right now. So yes, Hugh Freeze and his staff are going to be in their offices. They're going to be at practice. They're going to be in strength and conditioning. They're going to focus in on their student athletes and the game plan and trying to win football games and trying to recruit at the highest level. So it's a very tough schedule, and it demands a lot of time. But the Auburn family also deserves, in my opinion, somebody who's going to be part of this community and say yes a lot to certain roles, certain opportunities to give back. And I don't think anybody gets that more than Hugh Freeze and his wife Jill, who's just a delightful person in her own right.
NIL was just starting to nose to the surface the last time that we sat down. So you've been over baseball, you've been over a lot of things. If you were over NIL, if the buck stopped with John Cohen, good, bad, and ugly, how would you manage it?
Well, one of the ways I would manage it is, having a third-party system of NIL to me is problematic for many reasons that I won't go into. I think it puts a real burden on the third parties involved. It also, again, it just doesn't work. I think the other thing about NIL that gets lost is the reason somebody should get an NIL opportunity, in my opinion, is because they have a track record of success on that campus, in the classroom, as a student athlete, on the field, on the court, on the course, whatever it is. I think, as in recruiting, and I go back to my baseball roots here, right? When you're recruiting, you have a tendency to give, with 11.7 scholarships divided among 27 student athletes, you have a tendency to give much more of that scholarship aid to new players who really haven't done anything yet at that level. Okay, what does this do to your team? Well, you got the older kid who's an all-SEC player who's saying, wow, they just gave more scholarship aid to this kid who's not played one inning of college baseball in the toughest league in America, more than the person who just made all-SEC. It's just that way. Because when you're recruiting, you're always in a situation to where the next person in your program is the most important person in your program, because you got to keep getting better. And of course, under NCAA rules, nobody is allowed to make specific offers of NIL, but it's often talked about what the track record is of that program in the NIL space. So I think that the third party part of it, I think there has to be a better way. And I also think having players who have done it at a high level, that there should be a reward system for those student athletes.
If NIL were around when you played baseball at Mississippi State, what kind of NIL deal does John Cohen want to get when you're playing baseball at Mississippi State?
I was very fortunate. I was on a nice scholarship at Mississippi State. But as a former all-SEC player, the guys who were coming into our program who were replacing me were getting more aid than I was. So I'm hitting in whatever I was hitting in my last year, 3-hole, 4-hole, 2-hole, whatever it was. The new guys were on more aid. And the thing that, when I'm talking to administrators that they don't understand, they say, do student athletes really have those conversations about who's on what? Type of scholarship aid or NIL? I'm like, you're joking, right? Like, there's this thing called dormitories, and kids talk about every subject under the sun. They're going to know. And that's one of the challenges of a sport like baseball. When you have a head count sport like a football or basketball, everybody's on the same scholarship. But in a sport that's not head count like baseball, it gets around pretty quickly who's on what. It becomes competitive. And it takes a special type of coach like a Ron Polk to oversee that and make sure that that doesn't become a problem with a group of student athletes.
The transfer portal, that's another thing that's out there that it feels like it's, I don't know if it feels this way for ADs around the country, particularly the SEC. It feels like drinking water out of a fire hose, kind of like NIL. It got here and boy, it's taken off. So transfer portal, what would you like to see changed, altered, tailored with that?
One of the things that's mentioned all the time is the opportunity of the prospective student athlete or the current student athlete. And I believe fully in the opportunity. I believe every student athlete should have the opportunity for their best fit. We were talking about the word fit. Here's something nobody's talking about. With more and more and more 4-year transfers, that 4-year transfer comes into a program, who are they replacing? the kid who's not getting the opportunity out of high school. So high school opportunities are going to go down. Nobody's really talking about that. So if you grew up in the state of Alabama and your lifelong dream was to play at Auburn or Alabama, and that was your lifelong dream, as is the case of many kids in the state of Alabama, your opportunity is less now than it was before we allowed immediate eligibility for transfers. That's simple math. So I hear the current student athlete tell me, the older student athlete, hey, don't diminish my opportunities. And I completely understand that. But nobody's speaking up for the kids who are losing opportunities at the high school level.
That's a really good point. I don't know if people are really talking about that as much when it comes to the transfer portal. And I wonder why, after hearing you say it. Well, why are they not talking about that as much? I don't know.
Because the high school student, the prospective student athlete, isn't in place yet. They don't have the voice yet. Once they get to college, there is a little bit more of a voice. So, there's got to be a happy medium for everyone. But I think that situation will settle down a little bit. But a student athlete who is looking for a better situation, that ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
When life is unpredictable, choose Express Care Summerall to get the medical help you need. We're the only clinic in Summerall open 7 days a week. We also offer the convenience of drive-through accessibility and walk-ins with no appointment necessary. Our nurse practitioners Sarah Dawn Locke and Kobe Smith welcome you to our location on Highway 42 next to Fox's Pizza. Find your new primary care provider, Express Care Summerall, where your health care matters.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
You just completed a 4-year term, if I have the timeline correct. You were the chair of the Division I NCAA Baseball Committee. Got to see you in Omaha a couple of years ago. And that experience for you, being a baseball guy in your blood, how would you describe that experience?
Well, a lot of respect for the process that's in place, a lot of respect for the people in the room with you. When you're a kid, your parents are always telling you, hang out with the smart people, be around the smart people. And certainly I felt that way in the Division I Baseball Committee. It was a tremendous responsibility, but had a lot of help. And it's fun, but it's also a little bit heartbreaking at times when you see the team that you feel like, wow, this team might deserve to be in the NCAA tournament, but they don't get in. I take that seriously because I've been there. I have coached one of those teams you feel like had a chance to get in and they might not have gotten in the tournament. So, and these coaches and student athletes take it personally, and they should, because that's what they do. And so that part is difficult, and it'll never leave me. That list of 8 to 10 teams that had a chance to get in who didn't, I won't walk away from that mentally anytime soon, because I take that really seriously.
When we last sat down, I asked you, what did you feel separated you from previous ADs at Mississippi State? Is it okay to ask you that question now? Well, what do you think separates you from ADs prior to your stint here at Auburn?
Well, I go all the way back to a Larry Templeton, who had so much institutional knowledge and just a great man who's done phenomenal work with the Southeastern Conference. Okay, can you compare my work and his? Absolutely not. I mean, if you look at the funding that we received from the Southeastern Conference during my tenure versus the funding that he had during his tenure, is completely different. And Larry did such a great job of using all the resources that he could possibly muster, and I have so much respect for him. Greg Byrne, who was there for a short time, learned a tremendous amount from Greg, and I consider Greg and Scott Strickland to be really close friends. I don't make a ton of decisions without bouncing it off of them, and there are times that they bounce things off of me. And again, hang around the smart people. That's something that I was taught to do at a young age, and I feel like I still get that opportunity.
Going back to something you said a couple minutes ago, you were talking about the conversations that you have with some of the administrators about the conversations that go on in dormitories. Like, are you serious? Of course they're talking about these things. Do you feel like that kind of gives you an advantage being a former athlete, being a former coach? Maybe it gives you a leg up on some of these other ADs. Do you feel that way?
I feel like there's certain advantages. I do. The ADs in the Southeastern Conference who were not athletes at the Southeastern Conference level, they're there for a reason. They're really sharp people. They have even their great business backgrounds, fundraising backgrounds, their connectivity with coaches, and the way they deal with coaches is very, very high level. But I do feel like it's a little bit of an advantage. I remember as a coach, you're running a practice and somebody from compliance walks out to the baseball field and they just want a break from sitting at their desk for 8 hours, and compliance guys work, people work all hours of the day and night, but they walk up and you're the baseball coach and you go, why are they here? Is there a problem in compliance? Have we done something wrong? The AD shows up, have we done something wrong? Is there a problem? No, they just wanted to get out of their office. But I mean, when you're on the other side of that and you're a coach, you know what that feels like. You know what it feels like to have your team very well prepared and something not go your way. You know what it's like to be really passionate about preparing and recruiting and everything else, and something unexpected comes and gets in your way. I think those are the things I can connect with coaches about. I get it. I mean, there's very few feelings that any of our coaches have had that I haven't shared at some point in my career. So is there an advantage? I think there's a little bit of an advantage there.
A lot of incredible former athletes that have come through here at Auburn. Have you met one that's left you a little starstruck, the word? Maybe wowed you a little bit?
Yeah, we have a football player named Elijah McAllister who I got to meet with the other day, and there's several of them. Megan Schofield, who just won the women's amateur for the first time in Auburn history. I get to come across a lot of athletes. And it's one of the things about my career at Mississippi State, my career at Kentucky and other places. What gets lost, and our commissioner, who, by the way, I'm just about to be on a conference call with, tells us, and Mitch Barnhart really says this as well, let's not forget that one of our jobs is to help educate these kids, for them to have a great experience. And there are really special kids who are highly motivated, who are going to go off and do great things even outside of their sport. That's a big part of what we do, and we can't ever forget that, because that wasn't forgotten in my career. I had people who propped me up and allowed me to go out, take risk, fail, get up off the ground, and have an opportunity to continue. So you just can't lose that.
So winding down here, last time we sat down, I'm going to switch it up on you a little bit. Your go-to to try to just kind of chill out was binge watching shows. Right? Do you remember that?
Sure.
Do you still do that?
I do, and I kind of, either through my kids or no, they will say, "Hey, Dad, we know your personality, and we're always trying to find that right thing that you would watch."
You don't do a little bit at a time. You do it all.
Right. Because once I get locked into something, I have to complete it. So that's just a crazy personality trait, right? But and I'm trying to think of what I've watched recently. It's been a long time since I've watched anything. I have to admit, though, for whatever reason, when I'm in a really stressful situation and I've got to calm down, I will go to Big Bang Theory. Yeah.
Good choice.
Yes. So that 24 minutes, no commercials. If you're doing that on HBO Max, that 24 minutes is a good way to calm down.
I've told folks, look, if you want to calm down, watch mindless TV. Find something that you don't have to invest a lot in. I just started Succession recently. Started watching that. I think you recommended that one.
You know what? Nell turned me onto that. I have to admit, I'm one of those guys. It just didn't make a lot of sense. It didn't move fast enough for me, but I know it's a great show. I know there's a lot of fans out there, so I'm not demeaning the show, but it's certainly I did watch that one. Not one of my all-time favorites. I'd kind of put it right in the middle.
I haven't finished it yet. I don't know how it works out. I haven't finished it, so I'm kind of there too. I'm trying to like forge ahead here and finish it. Sometimes you can get stuck. So
don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network. For those on the go, we give you Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast.
What are we listening to? Are we listening to a playlist? Are we listening to a podcast?
What a great question.
Listen to our intimate interviews with guests on your favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and so many more.
Do you ever look back and say, my life, the story could have ended up differently had it not been for your grandparents?
Incredibly different, for sure.
Plus, you'll hear behind-the-scenes commentary on each guest, interview preparation, location, and so much more from Jason himself.
Do you have a favorite Coach Bowden story that you can share with us?
I can tell you this, what you see with Bobby Bowden is what you get.
Check out Audibles with Jason Scarborough, the podcast, on any of these popular podcast locations and hit subscribe, download, and enjoy. Now, back to the show.
With football season here, your duties as athletic director, I should have asked you this before. What was a typical game day like for you from the time you get up in the morning till the time your head hits the pillow at night? What's the game day like?
Well, certainly going to some tailgates and meeting with people. If it's 90 degrees or above, we're going to hand out water. So I'll hand out water to students. I like the morning of a football game, and I did this in Mississippi State as well. I like, after my morning run, I like to go and go through our restrooms in the football stadium just to make sure. A lot of people put a heavy emphasis on what a restroom looks like, and I completely get that. Buc-ee's has made a ton of money based off of restrooms, right? So I'll do that. I'll visit at the president's area and see all the dignitaries there. We go see the on-air talent that's broadcasting the game and talk to those guys. We'll meet with recruits. It's a busy day. If it's a night game, and this has been true of everywhere I've been, if it's a night game, it's going to start somewhere probably prior to 8 o'clock, and it's probably going to be 1 o'clock in the morning before you're done. It's going to be a long day, but it's fun. Everybody in the building is there for a reason, and everybody's pulling in the same direction. And no 2 game days are the same. So you have to anticipate what's going to happen. And of course, right now we're going to have a game in 48 hours, and there's a decent chance of rain. So that's going to change the game plan. It's just on the field. They're painting the field here at Auburn, here at Jordan Hare, Pat Dye field. And the first thing I was asking about is the rain. Is that going to alter your painting schedule for the surface? Everybody's got a job to do, and it's always altered by something. And staying on top of that is important to me.
My final question for you. You've written so many successful chapters in your story so far. How do you want to see these next chapters play out here on the Plains?
Yeah, I think we can have a championship level team in every single sport that we offer. And I want to get to that level. Again, it's been sporadic in certain time zones chronologically, but I'd love to see it all come together. And I feel like we're really on a nice trajectory right now. So that's what I want more than anything, is to be part of that with every single program. And again, you don't know what the future brings. Heck, we don't even know what the trajectory of college athletics will be over the next 4 or 5 years. But I like our trajectory here at Auburn.
I want to thank you for doing this. Your schedule, particularly now, is incredibly hectic and crazy. So you've been one of my favorites from day one, and we did part 2. Now we're doing part 3, maybe down the road. We'll see. But I always appreciate your time. You've been such a good friend too, and I'm rooting for you, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's always good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Oh, fellow lefty. Heck it. And you're a lefty too. I'm a lefty. You're a lefty. What? We got all these. Who else is a lefty? Just us 3? Just the cool people, the cool kids at the table? Okay.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week for another episode of Audibles with Jason Scarborough.